Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and I noticed recently that it's been close to a year since I uploaded my video on Shaman's Tears number 1, so I figured we should probably talk about Shaman's Tears number 2. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in July of 1993, this is a pretty cool cover, but more importantly, it's not just a cover, it's actually a fold-out double-sided poster. Now, I'm not going to be able to show you the entire poster because in order to do so, I would have to remove the entire cover from the book, and I really don't want to do that, seeing as how this is the only copy I have of Shaman's Tears number 2. But if I ever find another copy that has the cover intact, I will probably buy it, seeing as how this is always usually found in dollar boxes. Pull the cover off, unfold it, and make a short about it, just so everyone can see what it looks like. Writer, illustrator, Mike Grell. Art assistant, Brian Snowdy. Color artist, Joe Chiodo and Wendy Fouts. Color separator, Fierce Color Graphics. Lettering, Steve Haney. Steve, I know I'm saying your name wrong. I do apologize. Editor, Mike Gold. We can also see here what I was talking about. Here's another portion of the fold-out poster. From what I can tell, just by the parts of it I can open up and look at, it seems like a pretty cool poster, so I'm really excited to try and see if I can find another copy of this book just so I can have the poster to pull out and, probably get even framed if I'd be so inclined to do so, which I would be. Something else that's a little bit unique about this book, too, is that there is no writer letter comment section, and Mike actually explains this, that the time frame from when issue number 1 would be printed versus the time frame that issue number 2 would have to be printed to get it out on time meant that they wouldn't have time to get reader letters in and read and have responses ready to go to publish for issue number 2. So he decided to instead just kind of have his own, little column that, where he could just essentially talk about things that mattered to him with comic books as a whole and what he wanted to do with this book. What's odd about it, though, is that it starts right here on the second page of the book and then finishes later on at the end of the book rather than being all together, which I thought was really strange. As we get back into the story, it picks up pretty close to where we left off in issue number 1. We're back here at the Circle C headquarters, where a man by the name of Dan Queen is arriving and being greeted by Pending. And some of the guards are kind of whispering amongst themselves. One of the guards says, Idi Amin, Saddam Hussein, and Dan Queen are walking down the street. You've only got 2 bullets. Which ones do you shoot? And the guy says, the answer is Dan Queen twice, which goes to kind of explain what kind of person Dan Queen is and how despicable he might actually be. He appears to be the head of like a publishing company, or not a publishing company, a PR company, and is working in conjunction with Pending because Pending needs a way to make sure that his human-animal hybrids are painted in the most positive light possible, and he also wants them to be advertised to the masses and make potentially billions, if not trillions of dollars on the patents that he's hoping to secure as he's waiting for final judgment by the Supreme Court as to whether or not he can patent these life forms, despite the fact that they do seem to have actual sentience and intelligence. He maintains that because they're mostly animal instead of human, that he should own the patents to them. And in fact, he shows off one of them, Animus Prime, which he found in outer space on the Russian space station that was orbiting the Earth that he attacked, essentially, and brought back to Earth to use as a way to reverse engineer and create his own human-animal hybrids. And Dan Queen is shocked when he sees this creature as he can't believe what he's looking at. After seeing Animus Prime, Queen still has some reservations as he tells Pending that, if these guys aren't willing to fight each other, I'm going to have a hard time selling this to Madison Square Garden. But Pending says, take a look for yourself. They're more than willing to fight. As we see a gate open and Animus Prime turns around to see none other than Blazon. Now, if you recall back in issue number 1, the two of these have no love lost for one another, as Blazon, refuses to admit the fact that, he's essentially a slave to the Circle C corporation, and Animus Prime is the one calling him out for it. He even here says, "Oh, doing your master's bidding once again." And Blazon says, "Oh no, this is purely for personal pleasure." Then the fight ensues as Animus Prime just leaps in through the air and jumps right on Blazon's chest, but Blazon immediately fights back. Queen is actually worried that the two of them will kill each other, and Pending says, "Oh, it's no worries, they're just animals, who cares?" But, Queen's like, no. He's like, if we're going to watch them kill each other, this needs to be done on pay-per-view so we can make millions upon millions of dollars. He's like, I don't care if they die. I just want to make sure we get paid to watch them die, which goes a long way to certify that he is the absolute piece of garbage that the two guards were acting as if he was. Back on the Medicine Hat reservation, we see that Josh is standing in front of a tree in front of the sunset and is trying to come to terms with the vision that he had during the ceremony in which he was apparently given the powers of the Wakan. He's then approached by Greyhawk, who asks him, what exactly did you see in your vision? Greyhawk, of course, being one of the tribal elders and also the father of his friend Tom. Josh says, nothing, I was just hallucinating. But then Greyhawk asks him, then what's this? As he points to the necklace he's now wearing. Josh says, hey man, I didn't ask for any of this. I'm just not wanting to deal with this. And he wants to be left alone. However, Greyhawk once again tells him, you don't choose the power chooses you. And you are chosen, you are Wakan. However, Josh does not want to accept this as he hops on his motorcycle and takes off. And later on that evening, we see a bunch of the horses that are raised on the reservation as a helicopter just kind of zooms in over the pasture and scares the living crap out of all the horses. And we then see a couple of men giving payment to Tom, aka Josh's friend or perhaps former friend and the son of Greyhawk, as he is selling off all of the tribe's horses to these men. One of the men also says, hey, that's a pretty fancy looking belt you got on there. How much would that cost? And Tom automatically just says, here, you can take it. Now, the significance of this is that this is a belt that was made by Josh when they were younger, and Josh gave this to him as a symbol of their friendship and camaraderie. And Tom just handing it away is kind of signifying that Tom no longer cares about having Josh as a friend and wants nothing to do with him. The next morning at Circle C headquarters, we see that we are in the office of Pending as he has a television on with the news playing. The news reporter is talking about the Supreme Court case that is going on right now to determine whether or not Circle C can, in fact, hold patents on these new life forms that they've created. And one of the people that is being interviewed is Dr. Regus Patoff, who is, of course, Pending's business partner and also lead scientist. And Patoff is trying to, put any questions of safety or concerns that the public might have about these new creatures known as the Blood would have. And he states, there's no chance of them ever breeding because we only create each individual one as a single sex, and animals are incapable of cross-species breeding, which is not entirely true. But I see his point. If you've got one guy who's crossed with a badger and a woman who's crossed with a bat, the two of them can't breed with each other. Of course, he also makes a point to reiterate the fact that these creatures have much more animal DNA than they do human DNA. But the reporter presses him and asks, well, what happens if a human tries to breed with one of these things? And he immediately cuts her off and says, why would you even imply something so disgusting like that would even happen? Meanwhile, during this entire news report, Pending is having a conversation that we find out is actually with one of the senators who was touring the facility in issue number 1. And they've actually blackmailed this senator, as we see Pending has a photo of him having relations with Sigil, the half human, half bat creature, which is kind of odd because in the first issue, they implied that Signet was the blood member that was the one that they designed for quote unquote pleasure. Meanwhile, as Patoff continues to try and smooth things over with the reporter, he says, if it's really that concerning, we can always just resort to neutering these creatures when they're infants, and then there's never a possibility that they would breed. And we then are shown the outside of the facility where Animus Prime is back in his cell, and one of the guards, for some reason or another, decides to taunt him by, making jokes about neutering him and whatnot, and then decides to reach his hand through the bars and flick a cigarette into Animus's head. However, this is a terrible mistake, as he never realized how fast or how quickly Animus could react, and Animus jumps to his feet and grabs the man's hand, and I think we've all seen enough videos on the internet at this point, folks, to know that reaching your hand through the bars is always the dumbest possible plan. Without wasting a beat, Animus jams 2 fingers into the man's eyes, gouging both of them out, and then uses his jaws to just bite the man's hand clean off. Assumedly, this probably, if it doesn't kill the guard, makes him, well on his way to dying. Animus then uses the guard's hand to unlock his cell as he runs out of it trying to make his escape. He is, halted for a moment when Blazon from his cell yells Animus, and he looks out almost in a way that seems longing, as if he's hoping that Animus will also set him free. But Animus just looks back with a bit of a, hey, screw yourself view, as he drops the hand in front of Blazon's cell and takes off, leaving Blazon to regret the fact that he crossed Animus in the first place, as we see Blazon howl in probably anger and also frustration. The guards mobilize instantaneously to try and prevent Animus from escaping. However, they are in for a rude awakening, as Animus is an absolute killing machine, as we see him rip one of the guards' faces clean off as he disembowels another. Unfortunately for Animus, though, he is heavily outnumbered, as we see several guards open fire, one of which has a mounted turret machine gun. He does, however, make it over the exterior fence and manages to get on the other side. However, he is grazed by a bullet in the process. As he makes his escape into the woods, Pending states to Patoff that they have to mobilize the hunter-killers in order to go hunt him down and end him. Patoff doesn't really want to do this, but Pending reminds him that they're really relying on the Supreme Court ruling to come down in their favor, and if Animus manages to escape into a populated area and rip somebody's heart out, that's probably not going to work out in their favor, which is a fair argument. Meanwhile, in another part of whatever state they're supposed to be in, because I'm really not sure, we see that Josh pulls into a gas station bar, and as he starts to walk in, he notices the trailer and truck that we saw earlier on the reservation that belongs to the men that Tom sold all the horses to. As Josh approaches it, he sees all the horses in the back and realizes that they're the horses from the reservation. Unfortunately for him, just as this happens, the 2 men that Tom sold the horses to exit the bar and yell at Josh to get away from the truck. Josh, however, tries to confront the 2 men and states, hey, all of these horses are from the Medicine Hat Reservation. What in the hell are you 2 doing with them? The men, however, are not willing to deal with any of this, as they don't want to get caught for taking all of the tribe's horses. Even though they did pay for them, it's still not a legally binding deal. So they instead decide to immediately jump Josh and start beating the living crap out of him. And then they hop in their truck to drive off, leaving Josh on the ground, bloodied and bruised. And we see him start to get up off the ground, and as he looks up, we see something strange starting to form around his right eye. As the men continue to drive down the road, one of them yells at the man driving to keep the speed limit, where it is, keep it at 55 so that they don't get pulled over. The driver protests that, that's how you get caught, man, when they see you driving the exact speed limit. And then they look over and notice that there's a herd of pronghorn running across the side of the road, and that there's also something else running along with them. Suddenly, the pronghorn run out in front of the truck, and the driver swerves to try and miss them. And then they hear something loud thud on top of the roof. They don't realize what it is exactly, but they are afraid, and the man in the passenger seat decides to open fire through the roof of the truck as the driver radios for backup from the chopper. However, I should point out that if you fired off a gun like this in this small of an enclosed space, you would absolutely blow out all of your eardrums. There is no way that either one of these men would be able to hear after that. We then see that the thud on the roof was made by none other than Josh, whose outfit is now changed, and we see that he now has a symbol down the right side of his face. And he is in fact the Wakan now at this point, as he calls upon the spirit of the bear to give him strength, as we see him just grab the roof of the truck and rip it clean off. This, of course, distracts the men to the point that the driver crashes the truck as Josh jumps off, making a clean escape and avoiding injury. He then goes around to the trailer and rips the doors off, freeing the horses. And as he goes back to the cab, he finds that the men have died gruesomely in the accident. Like, seriously, look at this guy. He's bent up like a pretzel, and his mouth is like wrapped around the bent steering wheel with his tongue hanging out. It's pretty awful looking. He then notices the belt that the man had on and realizes that this is the belt he made for Tom, who he calls Broad Arrow, which I'm assuming is Tom's tribal name. And he realizes that the man who he considered his blood brother has actually betrayed him and the tribe. However, before Josh can process any of this, he is surprised by the helicopter as it shows up to provide backup. Josh starts to run away as the passenger of the chopper begins to shoot at him. However, he is cut off by a cliff that he immediately just leaps off of, though he does call for the assistance of the eagle spirit while he does this. As the chopper searches for Josh's body, as the men inside both reasonably assume he is clearly dead at the bottom of the ravine, he instead swoops in with the eagle spirit, which has now given him the ability to fly, and grabs the pilot out of the chopper, and the man inside the chopper is then left to die in a fiery explosion as the chopper crashes into the side of the mountain. And we see here that Josh has kind of skipped right over hero and moved directly into vigilante territory, as he is just immediately killing all of the people that he believes are in the wrong. The next morning, back at Circle C headquarters, Pending walks into Patoff's room, as we see Patoff has been sharing his bed with Sigil, even though he told the reporter that no human being would ever want to have any kind of carnal relations with these animal creatures. And Pending tells him that the official word on the CNN is that the Supreme Court has ruled in their favor and that they will have the ability to patent all of these new life forms. Patoff immediately leaps from his bed, dancing for joy, stating that the two of them are going to be rich beyond their wildest dreams. However, Pending tells him this is only the beginning, as he tells him that they need to call up Queen and get the PR rolling, and that he wants commercials airing during the Tonight Show this evening, and that the two of them are going to have to get hard at work to make sure that they can market this exactly the way it needs to, or to be marketed, so that they can maximize profits. Back on the reservation, we see Josh fly in, and as he lands, his clothes actually transform back to his normal attire. He is not necessarily feeling all of these newfound powers and abilities, and he yells at the woman that we saw in his vision in the first issue to leave him alone, but she says, "You are the chosen Wikasa Wakan," and that he is the shaman, the healer, the warrior, and that he has been chosen to receive the power. But Josh is not too happy about this, as we see the symbol on the side of his face start to retract back into his eye, as he states, "Where were you when I needed you? Where were you when my mother was dying? You could have saved her." But, this is a point where Josh needs to realize that, him having this power isn't so that he can just have everything he wants. It was given to him for a reason. However, the woman tells him that his mother's spirit is still alive in the earth around him, and in the cries of the hawk, and in the flowing rivers of the streams and waterfalls, and that, she's going to live on through the earth itself. However, the earth is in danger, as mankind is destroying and polluting it and basically just poisoning the blood and waters of the planet, and that Josh has to do everything in his power to prevent this from happening so that life on Earth can continue. She then tells him that, he has to find a way to help the planet before it's too late. And just as this is wrapping up, suddenly Greyhawk rides up on Josh's motorcycle and states, "Hey, nice bike. I remember when your dad rode it back from basic training back in '64. Josh goes to Greyhawk and says, "How do I know if I'm doing the right thing?" And then Greyhawk tells him, "That's the catch. You never really do." He's like, "That's what makes it interesting." And as he's walking away, he tells Josh, "Nice feather you got there," as he realizes that once again, Josh has come back from a vision with something that he didn't have before. Later that evening, Josh confronts Tom by punching him straight through the plate glass window at the front of the bar he was drinking in, and then follows him out and demands to know what's going on. Tom tells him that all he knows is that Circle C wants a lot of horse meat to use for, like dog food. Josh then says, "I used to look up to you. I wanted to be nothing more like you, or nothing more than be you, to belong." And then Tom says, "It was supposed to be me." Josh is confused, and Tom tells him, "I was the one who was supposed to receive the power, not some half-breed Irishman like you." He's like, "You turned your back on all of your heritage and all of us in the tribe." And Josh responds by saying, "Yeah, well, you sold yours," as he throws the belt back into Tom's face. He then gets up and starts to walk back towards his motorcycle, but Tom continues to argue with him, stating, "You don't have any right to judge me, as you don't know what it's like to live on the reservation, trying to feed a family that doesn't even belong to you." And then he states, "I'm out here trying to food and clothe somebody's bastard kid," as we see Sadie behind Tom turn and start to cry. And then he states to Josh, he's like, "You ran away from all of this, and you don't have any right to condemn any of this or me for trying to make a living on this reservation," as we see a child who we now know is actually Josh's, and that when Josh left, it wasn't because he was just trying to get off the reservation. He actually got Sadie pregnant and abandoned her on the reservation to raise his son on their own, or on her own. And that Tom, being a halfway decent guy, actually stepped in and is trying to take care of both Sadie and Josh's son. And now you know exactly why Sadie has such a problem with Josh, and it's pretty reasonable that she would react by punching him in the face after he disappeared for 12 years without so much as a phone call or trying to help her provide for their child in any way. And, why Tom, despite being kind of friendly with Josh in the first issue, made the point to state, Sadie's still pretty mad about everything that happened, which, again, she has every right to be that mad. And Josh, tried to play the whole thing off, stating, "Oh, well, we were just kids." Like, no, dude, you weren't just kids. You totally just ran out on your girlfriend and your child and ran away from all of your responsibilities because you didn't want to have to deal with the consequences of your own actions. Josh decides to go to Circle C headquarters then and arrives the next morning. And as he drives up to the gate, he is picked up by the security cameras, and Pending decides that he's not too happy about a stranger showing up unannounced to his doorstep. So rather than deal with the problem himself, he decides to let the blood handle it as he unleashes all of them to go and confront Josh. And we see that Josh realizes that he may have made a gigantic mistake as we reach the final page of the story. We then get into the rest of the large letter that was written by Mike Grell that takes up multiple pages and is just kind of a long, drawn-out type of story about what's going on, why he decided to create this book, and what his plans are for the future. And also, he kind of talks about some stuff that's going on with the comic book industry and how important he believes the role of the editor is. It kind of rambles a little, but overall, it's, an interesting read. After that letter, though, we are treated to this advertisement where it's essentially like crapping all over all the specialty covers and inserts and polybags and everything that was going on during the early 90s that a lot of people were upset about with comic books. And that would be all fine and well if it weren't for the fact that the first two issues of Shaman's Tears have specialty covers. The first issue having the red foil cover, and this issue having a fold-out poster cover. And both of these issues being 50 cents more than the traditional $1.99 cover price, which was common in 1993. So I do find it a little bit hypocritical that they're calling this out. However, this is an advertisement for issue number 3, which it says now only $1.95. So, okay, you are going to a more reasonable, normal price. But at the same time, I mean, a 50-cent difference isn't really that big of a deal, or at least it shouldn't be. And if it is, I don't think you should be buying comics in the first place if 50 cents is what's going to break you. We then get an advertisement for the Super Patriot miniseries, which I have not made any videos about yet as of recording this video. However, you can believe that I am absolutely going to make videos on the Super Patriot miniseries because Super Patriot is awesome. We then get an advertisement for Cyberforce. If you'd like to know more about Cyberforce, you can check out my Cyberforce playlist. And on the final page of the book, we get an advertisement for Wildcat Special number 1, the exact same ad we saw in last week's video. Again, I'm not positive that I had this, but if I do, I'll probably make a video on it at some point. And then on the reverse inside cover, which as we know is not actually a cover, we see some more of the fold-out poster, which this part of it features Sigil. And like I said, I really hope I can find another copy of this book someday so that I can take the cover off of it and unfold it to see what this whole poster looks like. And that was Shaman's Tears number 2. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good story. Overall, a decent book. I was a little surprised to see Josh instantaneously gain his powers and go like full vigilante mode, immediately just killing all of the people that he was fighting against instead of like trying to just, defeat them or hand them over to the authorities. I was, a little bit surprised that he's instantaneously going, full bore vigilante justice and just flat out murking people. However, I was also surprised, but in a more, enthusiastic way in terms of how good the story seems to be shaping up to be, about the whole twist of Josh being a deadbeat dad and running out on his family and just leaving them behind, letting Sadie, have to deal with raising their son all on her own, and Tom trying to step in and pick up the slack for his deadbeat friend. And, it really adds a deeper dynamic to Josh's character and the confliction that we, the reader, feel between, whether or not we should be rooting for this guy or if we should be, holding him accountable for his past sins and, realizing like, no, this guy's really screwed over some people that, he should have been more caring towards. And, it is kind of surprising to see that kind of dynamic pushed into a comic back in the early 90s. I got to give a lot of credit to Mike Grell here. He was really trying to write a much deeper story than a lot of comic books at that time had. But then again, those are just my opinions. Your opinions may be that the story was terrible or that you didn't seem to have a problem with Josh just straight up murking people when they cross him. Or you may not even think that he was a bad guy for running out on his girlfriend and his unborn child. But that's okay if you feel that way because everybody's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.